All right, so let's talk about, since we were briefly mentioning cosmic rays and their obvious effects on what's happening in the weather. We can also talk about Cyclone Kenneth hits Mozambique. Now, this is now the second cyclone that has hit this region in the last 6 weeks. And the significance of this is that Mozambique is getting walloped right now. Does this have anything to do with man-made climate change? No, absolutely not. But the damage that is causing in the floodwaters, now that has everything to do with increased cosmic radiation in our atmosphere, that these highly charged particles produce basically the juice that we need for these rain bomb storms. I mean, look, we've been talking about Mozambique since January 22nd. Tropical storm Desmond drops extremely heavy rain on Mozambique, leaves 9 dead in Madagascar. Heavy rains. How much rain did we get? They got almost 11 inches in 24 hours. Other areas got almost 10 inches. This is back in January 22nd, 2019. More flooding than what happened. Other areas received almost 8 inches in 24 hours. So we're seeing all these rain totals in a 24-hour period. Some of these folks get in a 2-month, 3-month period. And it didn't stop there. March 10th, we start to see the beginning of Tropical Cyclone Idai. This was just the beginning of what we thought was going on. 7 killed, 4,200 displaced, and 32,000 affected. And then as we fast forward 6 days later, death toll in Mozambique could surpass 1,000. Massive destruction reported. And I guess what's so important about this storm is that we still haven't fully recovered yet from the previous strong storm, cyclone, I should say. So, where are we at right now? Well, let's get a stat report. Tropical Cyclone Kenneth has rapidly intensified over the past 24 hours and is now a Category 4 hurricane equivalent on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale. Landfall is expected before the end of UTC Day, April 25th, in northern Mozambique. It says here at 600 UTC on April 25th, the center of the intense tropical cyclone Kenneth was located 90 miles east of Ingoane. That's what we're going to go with here. Mozambique and Moroni. The maximum sustained wind speed has been about 132 miles per hour with a pressure of 934. Over the last 6 hours, cloud tops surrounding Kenneth's pinhole eye have continued to cool, thus increasing further the intensity estimates. Current track of landfall north of Mozambican coast is expected by the end of the afternoon or in early evening tonight. And again, we were just talking about how we have not recovered yet from Idai. Over 1,000 people were killed. It was considered as one of the worst natural disasters in the southern hemisphere. Kenneth will make about a landfall about 620 miles north-northeast of Idai's point of impact. And here's a pretty good map here of this low pressure system that's making its way. Here we have the system right here. It will weaken as it makes landfall and totally dissipate, of course, after it being over land for quite some time. But we see it strengthening as it approaches landfall and weakens as it once hits the land. So we can only hope that this area does not have to go through a repeat. There are 30,000 people right now that have been evacuated from this area. Here we are, Al Jazeera. Impoverished Mozambique still recovering from the previous powerful storm, which made landfall further south last month, flattening the port city of Berea and killing more than 1,000 people across the vast swath of southeastern Africa. This compulsory evacuation process will continue until we have people secure, safe on the ground. The INGC said it had supplies ready to assist 140,000 people for 15 days. The UN World Food Program said the cyclone was expected to bring heavy rains in the area with more than 600 millimeters of rainfall expected. That volume of rain would be nearly double the 10 days accumulated rainfall that caused the flooding in Berea during Cyclone Idai. Let me repeat that. That volume of rain would be nearly double the 10 days accumulated rainfall that caused the flooding in Berea during Cyclone Idai. So lots of precipitation. And why is that? Why is there so much rain falling from this storm? And it's simple. Or I think it's simple. And it's not a coincidence. A lot of this stuff is happening side by side. They're talking about space age records for cosmic radiation coming up in this minimum. Not the last minimum, coming up now. We are expected to flirt with the possibility also of breaking TCI temperature readings. 4.44, that's, not saying much right now. We've seen it as low as 3.6. But right now, the minimum temperature reading was 2.05, and that happened in February of 2009, the beginning of our peak. So we could see record-breaking temperatures in the thermosphere as well. And again, when you talk about grand solar minimum and the correlation of these space weather conditions, and then someone called you a denier of science, I can't figure out how much clearer the science is in this situation when it's all explained to you. And the science is pretty clear in this community. A lot of it has to do with space weather influences. Let's think about it. The sun drives the climate, so it would make sense that cosmic radiation from space would also affect the climate. Highly charged particles. So you have these cosmic rays peaking every 11 years, and we see these gigantic floods, these massive storms, dropping double the amount of moisture that we saw in Idai in 10 days. That has everything to do with cosmic radiation influx. And basically, it's the super fuel for rain from these storms. Yes, you can say all you want. There's tons of water vapor in the atmosphere. We got you. Loud and clear. 2016 in February, our temperature peaked at 0.88 Celsius above baseline. 2016. And our parts per million CO2 was 402 parts per million. Fast forward to now, where we're sitting at a 412 parts per million, but the temperature has dropped a 0.5 degree Celsius in just 3 years. So, to me, when you talk about AGW and the CO2 theory, and that's starting to fall apart now because that scale is showing us something different. And then you talk about cosmic radiation influx and how much more cosmic rays are penetrating our atmosphere, which is causing a huge increase of precipitation falling from these storms. And we also learned that, or some of us already may know this, but because of saturated soil, it has a cooling effect. Okay, so follow along with me. So far, we've seen increased CO2 that is having a cooling effect right now in the last 3 years. As far as the temperatures are concerned on the UHA, or the UAH, we're seeing a cooling trend. with a weaker sun, weaker magnetosphere, more cosmic radiation, causing cloud nucleation. Cloud nucleation with increased precipitation is causing lots of saturated soil left and right. So if saturated soil has a cooling effect and cloud nucleation is on the uptick and there is a lot more cloud coverage around the world, that means more sunlight is being bounced back out into space because of all of the cloud coverage that we do have. And this all lines up. Everything lines up to what we've showed, the papers, the peer-reviewed papers, the science that we've talked about. Every 11 years, we have these conditions. This is what. So how can you deny science when we're showing you the correlation of what happens when we have an increase of cosmic rays and what happens when we have these in our atmosphere and our cloud coverage is increased and the saturation of the soil is increased, and weather.com is already admitting that saturated soil is has a cooling effect on our atmosphere. It's to me, I just don't understand how we could be called deniers of science whatsoever. And like I said, when you talk to people who support the AGW theory, you get a ad hominem attack. There was an article I'll probably share with you guys another night talking about the reliability of the UAH. And Dr. Scott Denning, I believe his name is, he was basically calling Dr. Roy Spencer con that their data is flawed and there's so many mistakes. But the articles on what's up with that, and the gist of it is that they point out their one error that they did make and their correction, and how that the RSS basically leads the way with NOAA and University of Washington, except those two agencies I just mentioned alter their data just a tad bit. One of the satellite systems that they rely on heavily for skin temperature only reads accurately when it's a clear sky. I just got done talking about cloud nucleation and how these solar minimums we see more cloud coverage. So how are we getting these accurate readings that they were showing on what's up with that? Some of these systems picking up a 0.24 degrees Celsius warming in the last 15 plus years. But yet we've seen cloud increase coverage twice in the last 11 years. To me, the UAH is at 0.18 degrees warming in the last 15 plus year. The other systems that are heavily favored are in the plus 20s. So it's not like the UAH is coming in at plus 0.2 or something that's really grossly underdone. I think the methods that they use at the UAH to get their temperature readings, I think they're way more reliable. Dr. Roy Spencer and John Christie have done tons of work, and I believe these guys have this down to a science, and when they have to make adjustments to their calculations, it's for the right reasons, not to help support their agenda of cooling. You know, Dr. Roy Spencer could care less what it's doing right now. He's just trying to show the world that it's natural and that CO2 has a very, very, very minimal effect on climate. It does not have the effect that the mainstream media wants you to believe. And the mainstream media is going to say, well, you know, Mozambique is getting, because it's hot over there, global warming, and the storms are worse during global warming. But that's not true. If that was the case, then why didn't the United States see more than 2 landfall hurricanes last year? 2. Major ones, I should say. This year, they're only predicting 2. 3 to 5 named, 3 to 5 storms, and I think around 18 named storms altogether this year. So if Mozambique is supposedly getting an increase of bad weather because of global warming, why is it not happening here? It's global, right? the temperature is increasing, right? So we should be getting stronger storms too, right? See, the theories just don't add up anymore. And the more studies that we're doing, the new research that we're seeing that's coming out is contradicting what the census is saying about climate change. And who's at fault? More and more people are starting to come out of the woodwork now to support the theory that CO2 theory is bunk, it's a hoax, and that this new science, these new papers that are coming out in the science community that's showing we are actually cooling. These elements that we have right now are forming one conclusion at this point. And so far it's reading cooling. Temperatures, cloud coverage, and then you have, of course, saturation of soil. All of those things are related right now, what's going on to cooling. So I hope this is an eye-opener that just because right now in the United States, we've got a lot to talk about in the U.S. too, but it's not just happening in Nebraska and Iowa and South Dakota where all the major floods that we've seen here from snow melt and everything. It's happening worldwide. Spain, Africa, Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, India. In fact, while I'm mentioning India, we're talking about massive crop loss as heavy unseasonable rain and hailstorms hit Telangana, India again. And this is everywhere, not just, I'm not handpicking out one area and just showing you all the headlines from there. I'm picking out literally every spot in the world right now. We have a serious situation where crops are being damaged. And each year that we've been reporting on this, we've seen crop damage increase. And now there is a huge concern for farmers to return to farming after the damage that they've endured in these storms in the last 3 years. We've reported several times here in the U.S. 50% of the people who have lost crops just recently here in Nebraska, South Dakota, and Iowa, farmers fear that they are not going to be able to come back from this. 50% of the farming is not coming back. And that's huge when you think about Nebraska being the number 3 corn and ethanol producer in the United States. That's huge. The worst affected are paddy and mango crop. Government officials said April 22nd, adding that damage will likely increase. More rain is expected in days ahead. The exact loss could be more, but our preliminary information says paddy has been damaged in about 30,000 acres, mango in about 20,000, and other vegetable crops a few thousand acres. Senior Agriculture said the damage was extensive. Mango trees were flattened due to the impact of hail and strong gales. Banana, papaya, sweet lime, green chili, lime, and other horticultural crops were also damaged. The officials said, based on initial estimates from affected areas and other districts as well. The storm also attenuated roads and caused several power outages. Here's some footage of some of the damage. No, thank you. But you guys can check this out at watchers.news. They do an extensive job at covering worldwide crop loss, worldwide weather, whether it's seismic, whether it's volcanic. Watcher.news does an excellent job of reporting on this at times. But we see a lot of these worldwide floods, and right on cue last week as the Watchers was talking about the unusual amount of landslides across the region of India, Southeast Africa, everywhere across the world really, even here in the United States. As soon as they mention it, boom, 3 or 4 days into that mention, there's a headline almost every day talking about landslides and people dying in these landslides. So what are these heavy rainfalls and landslides and floods all have in common? And that is science is creating this mess. When you have highly charged particles intermixing with water vapor, water droplets, turn into, like, again, we have an abundance of cosmic rays in our atmosphere, highly charged particles, supercharging these particulates, water drops, making them super drops. I promise you, if we were getting these storms in 2014, 2015, they would not be as intense and as frequent as we're seeing. I'm not saying that these types of rainfall are not possible during a solar maximum, but you're not going to see the frequency and you're not going to see the amounts as big as we're seeing right now. And especially when we keep seeing new reports of space age records being broken for cosmic radiation, and TCI readings are about to hit a new cold age record. Everything is correlating with the science of the solar cycles and solar minimum and what will be a grand solar minimum here after solar cycle 25. Guys, we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.